Have you ever wondered why some people act in ways that defy logic, why their behavior shifts so drastically that you know something else must be at work? There are moments when you look into someone's eyes, and it's as if they're not even there. The voice sounds the same, but the spirit behind it is not. My friend, there is a realm beyond what your natural eyes can see, and the enemy operates in that invisible realm. Jinn, unclean spirits, demonic entities, whatever name you call them, are constantly seeking vessels. They are looking for bodies to inhabit, voices to speak through, and minds to control. You cannot afford to be ignorant about this, because possession doesn't begin with a scream, it begins with a suggestion. Possession begins with permission. That's the first and most dangerous truth you must understand. Spirits cannot just enter anyone they choose. They need an opening, a doorway, a gate, a legal right. And sometimes that permission is not given consciously. It happens through ignorance, disobedience, or prolonged exposure to darkness. You see, the unseen realm operates by principles, not emotions. There are spiritual laws that govern access, authority, and influence. Just like in the physical world, no one can walk into your house unless you open the door or leave it unlocked. In the same way, no spirit can invade your life unless a gate is open. The tragedy is that most people leave their spiritual gates unguarded. They scroll through lustful images, listen to perverted music, speak words of anger and hate, not realizing that each of these actions opens a door in the spirit. You might think it's just entertainment, just self-expression, just harmless indulgence, but in the invisible world, those moments become permission slips. Every act of rebellion is a yes, written in the spiritual realm. Every compromise whispers you may enter. Jinn are legalistic entities. They operate under spiritual laws. When you break divine order, you hand them the right to operate. They can smell disobedience the way predators smell blood. The moment you violate truth, you weaken your spiritual covering. They don't attack strength, they attack vulnerability. That's why the enemy doesn't need to shout. All he needs is a whisper that gets you to drop your guard, a subtle invitation that seems harmless but carries a heavy price. It begins with a thought. That thought, if not resisted, becomes a desire. The desire, when entertained, becomes an action, and that action becomes an open gate. Once the gate is open, the spirit has permission to influence. And once influence deepens into agreement, possession becomes possible. Possession is simply prolonged agreement. It's the result of continually allowing darkness to dwell where light should rule. People often imagine possession as violent and dramatic, someone screaming, convulsing, foaming at the mouth. But it rarely begins that way. Possession begins quietly. It begins in the silence of compromise, in the shadows of neglect, in the loneliness of a heart that has turned away from truth. It's when a person stops guarding their mind, stops feeding their spirit, and begins to entertain the whispers of deception. You cannot be possessed by what you resist, but you can be possessed by what you entertain. And entertainment is the devil's easiest disguise. He won't come with horns, he'll come in the form of fascination. Something that catches your attention, pulls your desire, and seduces your will. The moment your will surrenders, your gate is open. That's why discernment is not optional, it's survival. Discernment keeps your spiritual locks strong. It helps you recognize when something or someone is not right, even when everything looks harmless on the surface. The enemy's strategy is not to scare you, it's to seduce you. If he can get your consent, he doesn't need your fear. Now here's the truth that shakes the kingdom of darkness. Your spirit is designed to be a temple. That means only one spirit is meant to dwell there. The moment you allow any other influence to reside, you are hosting an intruder. The power of possession is not in the strength of the jinn, it's in the surrender of the human. The jinn cannot rule unless the human yields authority. So how do they gain permission? Through sin that remains unrepented, through words that invite darkness, through objects or practices tied to occultism, through relationships that transfer spiritual energy, and sometimes through inherited generational agreements, covenants made by ancestors that still echo in the bloodline. That's why some people battle things they never personally invited. their fighting contracts signed before they were born. But even that can be broken when truth is revealed and authority is reclaimed. The good news is, the same door that lets a spirit in can also cast it out, but it begins with awareness. You cannot close what you don't know is open. You cannot bind what you don't believe exists. So the first step is revelation, understanding that possession begins with permission. The second step is repentance, withdrawing that permission. And the final step is restoration, reclaiming your rightful authority as a vessel of light. Spiritual weakness is the entry point the enemy loves most, because it's the one most people never notice. When the spirit becomes weak, the gate begins to crack. You may not feel it immediately, but weakness in your inner man makes you spiritually vulnerable to invasion. Jinn, unclean spirits, demonic forces, whatever you call them, are drawn to weakness like vultures to decay. They wait for moments when the human soul is tired, when faith is low, when sin has dulled discernment, and when pain has built walls around the heart. That's where they whisper, and that's where they strike. Sin, fear, and trauma, these are the three most common cracks that open a human being to possession. Sin weakens the spirit by separating you from divine covering. Fear opens your emotions to torment. Trauma breaks the soul's defenses, making it easier for darkness to settle where peace used to live. Each one of these forces drains your inner strength until the spirit that was meant to rule starts to serve. Sin is not just a mistake, it's a spiritual exchange. Every act of sin hands over a little piece of authority. It's like giving away the keys to your house one by one. When a person lives in unrepented sin, they are building a throne for darkness within themselves. Every compromise adds another stone to that throne. And the more comfortable sin becomes, the more comfortable the spirits attached to it become. You may not see them, but they are there, watching, waiting, growing stronger through your disobedience. The danger of sin is that it desensitizes you. It numbs the conscience. What once brought conviction now feels normal. That numbness is spiritual paralysis. The person becomes spiritually asleep, unaware of how exposed they've become. The jinn doesn't need your full surrender at once. It just needs you to stop fighting. Because once resistance ends, access begins. Then comes fear. Fear is the spirit's way of saying, I no longer trust that I am protected. Fear replaces faith with imagination, imagination of danger, destruction, and hopelessness. And what you continually imagine, you eventually invite. Fear is faith in the wrong source. It magnifies the power of the enemy instead of the authority of God. When fear grows, your spiritual frequency lowers. That's when entities begin to attach themselves, feeding off your anxiety, your sleepless nights, your constant worry. Fear becomes a magnet for torment. That's why the scripture says, perfect love casts out fear, because love realigns you with divine truth and closes the door fear opened. And then there's trauma, the silent weapon. Trauma doesn't just hurt the body, it shatters the soul. It creates cracks deep in the emotional realm. A person can function, smile, and even succeed while still carrying the residue of trauma. But underneath, their spirit may be bleeding, and where there is unresolved pain, there is an open invitation for spirits of despair, anger, or depression to dwell. You see, jinn look for unhealed wounds. They feed on emotional energy. A heart broken and never healed becomes a house of echoes, and those echoes attract spiritual noise. This is why many people who suffer severe trauma begin to experience strange sensations, unexplainable thoughts, dark dreams, a heaviness that lingers even in peaceful moments. These are not always psychological, sometimes they are spiritual. Because pain, if not surrendered, becomes permission. An unhealed trauma creates a vacuum and emptiness that something will eventually fill. The enemy knows this. That's why he doesn't just attack your actions, he attacks your emotions. He attacks your confidence, your sense of identity, your relationships, your memories. Because when he weakens your inner man, he prepares you for possession. The jinn doesn't need your invitation. It only needs your exhaustion. When your spirit is too weak to resist, that's when infiltration becomes easy. But here's what most people don't realize. Spiritual weakness doesn't happen overnight. It's gradual. It's a slow leak of strength over time. You stop praying as much. You stop discerning what's around you. You stop feeding your spirit with truth. And before you know it, your inner fire has dimmed. That's when the shadows start to gather. The devil never rushes, he waits until the walls are thin. Then he moves in quietly. And yet, even in weakness, restoration is possible. Because weakness doesn't mean defeat, it means there's a need for renewal. You can rebuild your spirit by returning to truth, by confronting the sin, by forgiving those who broke you, and by facing your fears with divine authority. Every time you confront what broke you, you reclaim ground. Every time you choose faith over fear, you close a door. And every time you repent, you take back legal rights from the enemy. You see, the human spirit was designed to dominate, not to be dominated. You were made to carry light, not darkness. But when that light is neglected, darkness sees an opportunity. And that's why spiritual strength must be maintained daily through purity, through awareness, through alignment. Because when the spirit is strong, no unclean thing can remain. When the enemy finds no weakness, he finds no access. When he finds no access, he finds no control. And when he finds no control, he flees. Every human being is built with gates, spiritual entry points that connect the physical and the invisible. These gates are not made of metal or wood. They are made of awareness, emotions, thoughts, and actions. The Jinn, the spirits that wander without a home, are always searching for open gates. They cannot create doors, they can only enter the ones you leave unguarded. The mind, the emotions, and the physical body, these are the three primary gateways through which spiritual entities access human lives. When any of these gates are left unprotected, influence becomes inevitable, and influence, if not resisted, becomes possession. The first and most powerful gate is the mind. The mind is the command center of the human being. Whatever controls the mind controls the man. That's why the battle is never fought with claws and fangs. It's fought with thoughts. A jinn doesn't need to break through your walls. It needs to suggest an idea strong enough to make you open them yourself. A single thought, if left unchecked, can become an entry point. The moment a lie is believed, truth is displaced, and where truth is absent, deception can reign. The enemy knows that if he can plant a thought that questions your worth, your faith, your safety, or your identity, he can begin to build a fortress inside your own imagination. That's how infiltration begins, not with a roar, but with a whisper. You're alone. You're not good enough. You'll never change. Those are not just words, they are spiritual keys testing the lock of your mind. If you agree with them, the lock clicks open. Agreement grants access. And once the jinn finds agreement, it no longer needs permission, because now it lives in your reasoning. That's why renewing the mind is a spiritual act, not a mental one. Every unguarded thought is a potential door. When you meditate on negativity, when you dwell on fear, when you replay pain instead of releasing it, you are feeding the thoughts that feed them. Then comes the second gate, the emotions. Your emotions are the atmosphere of your soul. They were designed to help you feel life, to connect, to express. But when emotions rule instead of being ruled, they become dangerous openings. Uncontrolled anger, deep sorrow, jealousy, and bitterness are more than just feelings. They are vibrations that attract the same energy that produced them. Spirits of rage, depression, or lust move through emotional frequencies. They look for a heart that is wounded, a spirit that is tired, a soul that is unstable. When a person refuses to forgive or refuses to let go of pain, they are essentially keeping their emotional gate open. You might have noticed that when people live in prolonged anger or fear, their entire presence changes. Their faces harden, their words shift, their energy feels heavy. That's because emotions influence atmosphere, and atmosphere influences spirit. Darkness thrives in heavy atmospheres. So when a person refuses to release their pain, they are unknowingly hosting spiritual company. The longer the emotion stays unhealed, the stronger the attachment becomes. That's why emotional healing is not just therapy, it's warfare. Every healed emotion shuts a gate in the face of the enemy. And finally, there is the gate of the body. The body is not just flesh, it's a vessel that houses the spirit. Every physical act has spiritual significance. What you consume, how you treat your body, What you expose it to, all these actions either strengthen or weaken your spiritual walls. Many people unknowingly open physical gates through certain practices, addictions, or objects connected to occultism. The jinn attach themselves to what carries their energy. That's why environments filled with impurity, blood, and immorality attract spiritual presence. When the body is defiled, the spirit becomes vulnerable. Sometimes even prolonged sickness, exhaustion, or neglect of the body can become an opening. When the body grows weak, the spirit becomes weary. And when weariness meets hopelessness, darkness looks for opportunity. That's why maintaining purity is not about religion, it's about protection. The cleaner the vessel, the less room there is for infestation. The tragedy is that many people guard their homes, their cars, their bank accounts, but they never guard their gates. They let anything into their minds through media, anything into their hearts through relationships, and anything into their bodies through desire. And then they wonder why their peace is gone, why they feel heavy, confused, and spiritually disconnected. What they don't realize is that every gate left unguarded becomes a highway for invasion. You were designed to be a temple, and a temple has boundaries. Its gates are sacred because what enters determines what dwells. That's why discernment must become your watchman. Every thought, every emotion, every experience must be filtered through light. Before you let it in, you must ask, does this bring peace or confusion, healing or heaviness, truth or temptation? Because whatever you allow to enter will eventually influence what grows inside. Jinn cannot force their way in. They are opportunists, not conquerors. They wait for the door you forget to close, for the thought you refuse to confront, for the emotion you refuse to heal, for the body you refuse to discipline. But once you understand that your gates are sacred, you begin to take back control. You begin to clean your atmosphere, fortify your mind, heal your heart, and honor your body as the vessel it was created to be. Unforgiveness and bitterness are two of the most subtle yet powerful invitations for spiritual possession. They don't come wearing masks of evil, they come wearing the face of pain, the sound of justice, and the feeling of being wronged. But what most people don't realize is that holding on to unforgiveness doesn't punish the one who hurt you, it empowers the one who seeks to possess you. Bitterness is like spiritual acid. It corrodes the container it lives in, not the object it's aimed at. And every moment you replay that wound, every time you relive that betrayal, you are keeping the door open for something far darker than your memory. Unforgiveness is not just an emotion, it's a spiritual posture. It says, I will not release this pain. And in that refusal, you unknowingly anchor your soul to the very offense that broke you. The enemy understands this. He doesn't have to destroy you if he can keep you holding on to what destroyed you. He knows that unforgiveness freezes the healing process, locks your emotions in time, and disconnects you from peace. That frozen place becomes a dwelling ground for spirits of resentment, anger, and vengeance. They enter quietly, disguising themselves as self-protection. They whisper, "You're just setting boundaries," while feeding your bitterness with every reminder of what was done to you. The danger is, bitterness feels justified. It feels like power. It feels like control. But in truth, it is bondage. When you refuse to forgive, you tie your soul to the offender and the offense. You relive it, rehearse it, replay it, and every time you do, you reopen the wound. A wound that doesn't heal becomes an entry point. That's where Jinn love to dwell, in unresolved pain, in unfinished forgiveness, in places where love has died but memory still burns. People often say, "I can't forgive them," but what they really mean is, "I won't let go." And every "I won't" is a gate. Forgiveness isn't denying the pain, it's denying the pain the right to rule you. It's the act of cutting spiritual cords that tie you to darkness. When you forgive, you don't set them free, you set yourself free. Because unforgiveness doesn't imprison them, it imprisons you, and darkness loves prisoners. There's something about bitterness that invites other spirits. It rarely travels alone. It brings with it anger, self-pity, revenge, and depression. They come like a gang. One opens the door, the others follow. You start feeling constantly tense, easily triggered, always defensive. Your peace evaporates. You begin to lose sleep, and even your health begins to reflect what your spirit is carrying. That's not coincidence, that's connection. Because the spiritual always manifests in the physical. The enemy doesn't need to tempt you into witchcraft if he can keep you in bitterness. Both have the same effect, they distance you from divine flow. Bitterness blinds discernment. You stop seeing with love and start seeing through offense. And the moment your perception is poisoned, your judgment becomes compromised. You start calling evil good and good evil, simply because your emotions are leading you. Spirits of bitterness love that blindness. They whisper, "Don't trust anyone. Everyone's against you. Protect yourself." And while you build walls to keep others out, you trap darkness inside. Many people live possessed not by screaming demons, but by silent ones, resentment, jealousy, and unforgiveness. Their hearts are heavy, their words sharp, their joy gone. They think it's just personality, but it's possession in disguise. Because whatever controls your emotions controls your spirit. And if anger has the final say, peace no longer reigns. Forgiveness is not weakness, it's warfare. It is the act of disarming the enemy's hold on your heart. It closes the gate that bitterness opened. It says, "You will not use my pain to destroy my purpose." The moment you forgive, you remove the enemy's legal right to torment you. The Jinn can only dwell where authority is surrendered. And forgiveness reclaims that authority. Sometimes forgiveness feels impossible because the pain was deep. But even then, you must understand this. Forgiveness is not about fairness, it's about freedom. You forgive not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. You let go, not because it's easy, but because your destiny is too precious to be chained to your past. When you hold bitterness, your spirit becomes crowded. There is no space for joy, no space for revelation, no space for divine presence. But when you release it, you make room for light to return. The more you forgive, the lighter you become. The lighter you become, the stronger your spirit grows. And where light reigns, darkness cannot remain. Jinn feed on fear, confusion, and rebellion. Those three forces are their oxygen, their sustenance, their atmosphere. Wherever they find fear, they settle. Wherever they find confusion, they whisper. Wherever they find rebellion, they reign. Because these are not just emotions or attitudes, they are spiritual climates. They create the environment that allows darkness to thrive. If peace is the atmosphere of heaven, then fear and rebellion are the atmosphere of hell. And the moment a person begins to live in that atmosphere, they start to attract the presence of what feeds on it. Fear is one of the enemy's oldest tools. It was fear that made Adam hide. Fear that made Peter deny. Fear that paralyzed nations and silenced prophets. Fear is not just being afraid, it's misplaced faith. It's faith in the wrong power. It's believing the lie that darkness can harm you more than light can protect you. When fear enters a heart, it begins to rewrite perception. You start to see danger where there is none, failure where there is potential, hopelessness where there is grace. Fear blinds the eyes of the spirit, and when the spirit can't see, it cannot discern. That's when the Jinn begin to speak louder. They use fear to gain control because fear weakens authority. You cannot command what you fear. You cannot rebuke what you respect. And fear gives respect to the wrong source. Every time fear is allowed to dwell, it invites torment. That's why people who live constantly in fear often experience spiritual heaviness, restlessness, or strange occurrences. They've created an atmosphere that welcomes it. Fear gives off a spiritual scent that attracts spirits of oppression. But the moment a person confronts fear with faith, that scent disappears. Fear is the bait, faith is the shield. Then there is confusion. Confusion is the fog that covers truth. It's not ignorance, it's interference. It's when you know something deep inside but can't seem to hold on to clarity. It's when your thoughts race, your emotions conflict, your decisions feel clouded. That's not random, that's spiritual. Jinn thrive in confusion because confusion breaks focus. A distracted mind is an open gate. When you can't discern your own thoughts, it becomes easy for foreign voices to blend in. They whisper ideas that sound like your own reasoning but carry the weight of deception. Confusion separates you from alignment. When your spirit, soul, and bodies stop agreeing, you become divided within yourself. And a divided man cannot stand. The enemy doesn't always need to possess you outright. Sometimes he just needs to scatter your mind. Because once your mind is divided, you will destroy yourself without his help. Confusion makes you question truth, doubt purpose, mistrust love, and rebel against correction. And that leads directly to the third feeding ground, rebellion. Rebellion is not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet disobedience, doing what you know is wrong and convincing yourself it's right. It's saying, I know better than truth. And the moment a person takes that posture, they step into the enemy's jurisdiction. Rebellion is the very language of fallen spirits because rebellion was their beginning. That's how they became what they are. So when you live in rebellion, you speak their tongue, you share their energy, you dwell in their kingdom. And they recognize that. That's why rebellious people are often tormented people, because rebellion disconnects you from authority. And wherever there is no authority, there is no covering. Rebellion isn't just about breaking laws, it's about breaking alignment. The Jinn know that divine order is what keeps you protected. So they push you to resist it, to despise correction, to ignore warning, to redefine truth. Once you rebel, they no longer need to fight you, they can simply follow you. Because rebellion always walks toward darkness. Fear, confusion, and rebellion are the unholy trinity of possession. Fear opens the door, confusion blinds you from seeing it, and rebellion locks it behind you. Together they create a spiritual cage. That's why people trapped in these cycles often feel distant from peace, even when they try to pray, because the air they're breathing spiritually is polluted. They've become the environment the enemy lives in. But the opposite is also true. When faith replaces fear, when clarity replaces confusion, when obedience replaces rebellion, the atmosphere shifts. Light returns, order is restored, and the presence of the Jinn cannot remain. They can only exist in chaos, and chaos cannot live where peace rules. That's why divine order and obedience aren't just about morality, they're about power. They keep you aligned with light. You cannot feed what you refuse to sustain. Stop feeding your fear with imagination. Stop feeding your confusion with doubt. Stop feeding your rebellion with pride. Because every time you do, you starve the spirit world that thrives on your weakness. And once they have nothing left to feed on, they have nothing left to hold on to. Darkness always seeks its own environment. Just as light attracts light, darkness attracts darkness. Jinn do not flourish everywhere. They thrive where corruption, impurity, and chaos already exist. They are drawn to atmospheres that mirror their nature because environment shapes influence. When a place is saturated with deception, violence, immorality, or spiritual neglect, it becomes like fertile soil for them to plant their presence. They don't just show up randomly, they are invited by the conditions created. Every environment carries a spiritual climate, and that climate either repels or attracts them. This is why certain places feel heavy the moment you walk in. Nothing has been said, no one has touched you, yet you feel a weight. That weight is not physical, it's spiritual residue. The environment has been charged by the activities done there, by the words spoken there, by the energy produced there, and spirits are drawn to energy. A place of hatred will feel oppressive. A place of lust will feel defiled. A place of violence will feel tense. You may not see them with your eyes, but your spirit can sense what dwells there. The same principle works in reverse. When a place is filled with truth, love, and purity, it becomes uncomfortable for darkness. Light makes darkness scatter. But when truth is absent, when boundaries are broken, when people indulge in practices that defile the space, the atmosphere becomes an open invitation. This is why environments matter so much. Where you live, where you work, where you spend time, all of it influences your spiritual state. You cannot live in darkness and expect light to thrive within you. Jinn feed off what is already present. If a community tolerates corruption, spirits of corruption will thrive. If a household tolerates anger and strife, spirits of discord will dwell there. If a room is filled with unclean images, rituals, or objects tied to darkness, that room becomes a portal. It is not superstition, it is principle. Because every action leaves a spiritual imprint. Every word, every sound, Every act of rebellion creates a frequency, and that frequency either invites or repels. Darkness is drawn to what sounds like itself. This is also why generational or cultural environments matter. People raised in homes filled with addiction, violence, or occult practices often find themselves battling unseen forces from a young age. It's not that they personally chose it. It's that they were born into an atmosphere where those spirits already had influence. Without intervention, that environment shapes their normal. And once it feels normal, it feels permissible. That's how entire communities or families can stay bound for decades, because the environment has become their cage. And here is the subtle danger. You can carry an environment with you. If you consistently dwell in places of darkness, you start to absorb that atmosphere. Your mind begins to think like it, your emotions begin to feel like it, your habits begin to align with it. And soon, even when you leave the physical space, the spiritual residue lingers on you. This is why discernment about where you go, what you watch, who you connect with, and what you allow into your personal space is not optional. You're not just visiting places, you're entering atmospheres. Jinn are opportunists. They are not omnipresent, but they are observant. They look for corrupted spaces because corrupted spaces make their work easier. In a pure atmosphere, they have to fight to gain ground. In a dark atmosphere, they can simply rest and grow. That's why clubs, ritual sites, violent homes, and even certain online spaces become breeding grounds for torment. They're not just locations, they're spiritual habitats. But you are not powerless. Environments can be shifted. You can clean a space spiritually by what you speak, what you allow, and how you live. Light does not negotiate with darkness, it displaces it. The moment truth and purity enter, the frequency changes. And when the frequency changes, the spirits that fed on the old atmosphere can no longer stay. They starve without their environment. That's why some people experience peace after cleansing their homes, changing their music, changing their habits, or breaking ties with toxic relationships. They didn't just change scenery, they changed the spiritual climate. You were never meant to live in an atmosphere that oppresses your spirit. You were created to be a carrier of light, shaping every environment you step into. When you maintain purity, honor, and awareness, you create a climate that suffocates darkness. Jinn cannot thrive where truth reigns, because truth starves the deception they live on.